Welcome to Professor Snyder's, that's me, Music Biz News. John Lennon wrote a song entitled Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out. And one of the verses in that song was, everybody loves you when you're 6 foot underground. And you hippies out there remember Abby Hoffman, who famously said, the 60s are gone, dope will never be as cheap, sex never as free, and the rock and roll never as great. So the millennials and the Gen Zers out there, no doubt, tire of hearing us boomers brag about creating rock and roll. The boomers own Jimi Hendrix, the boomers own Pink Floyd, the boomers own the Rolling Stones, the boomers own the Beatles. For the boomer generation, rock and roll was more than just music. It was a lifestyle. And that's why now we anguish over the loss of every hero that we had. In 1969, Jimi Hendrix said, "It's funny the way most people love the dead. Once you're dead, you're made for life. You have to die before they think you are worth anything." And he was right. Artists' death have become a $1 billion business. Okay, you boomers out there, you remember when Paul McCartney was dead. Actually, he wasn't dead. He's still alive. But back in 1969, a lot of people thought he had died in a car accident, and that the label had replaced him with a look-alike to keep the Beatles going because they were making so much money. And the proof that people found was on the cover of Abbey Road. John was the clergyman, the preacher, Ringo, the mourner, George, the grave digger, that's the reason he wore the jeans, and the fake Paul didn't need shoes because he was dead, symbolized. Also, Paul's eyes are closed, and he's holding a cigarette in his right hand, though he was left-handed. And even the license plate of the Volkswagen in the background was considered to be a clue to this conspiracy to trick the public. But the attention created a huge boost in record sales, both of Abbey Road and all of the Beatles' previous albums. So the Beatles and the labels, they didn't do anything to dispel these rumors that Paul had died because it created so much attention. And this was a taste of how even the rumor of an artist dying can result in big bucks. Jump to now, 2025. Ozzy Osbourne died on July 22nd. He was 76 years old. Since his death, he's gained over 6 million monthly listeners on the platform as a solo artist, jumping from about 12.4 million to 18.7 million. And Black Sabbath, the band, meanwhile, went from 19.8 million to 24.6 million. Ozzy Osbourne's record lands on the major chart for the first time ever following his death. And Brian Wilson died on June 11th. This year we saw a 184% increase in the Beach Boys streams and the highest chart position in 60 years for the Pet Sounds album. The week after Brian's death on June 11th. Brian Wilson was 82 years old. Sly Stone died June 9th. He was 82. We also witnessed a 563% increase in Sly and the Family Stone's streams the week after Sly Stone's passing. When Van Halen died in 2020, there was a 1,300% increase in streams. And now, in 2025, it seems like we hear about an artist, a musician from the 60s and 70s dying almost weekly. Paul McCartney is 83 years old. Elton John is 78. Mick Jagger is 82. Stevie Nicks is 77. Bob Dylan is 84. Eric Clapton is 80. You get the idea. the rate of the passing of that generation of musicians is increasing, the frequency. And the first instance of an actual death causing a big cash bump was when Elvis died in 1977. Elvis record sales skyrocket following his death. But it was after Elvis that labels figured out that the death of an artist could result in large increases in sales and profits. When Mark Chapman shot John Lennon in front of the Dakota Building in New York in 1988, 20 million Americans found out about John Lennon's death when Howard Cosell, the sports announcer for Monday Night Football, interrupted, calling the game, and announced that Lennon had been shot.
An unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News in New York City. John Lennon, outside of his apartment building on the west side of New York City, the most famous perhaps of all of the Beatles, shot twice in the back, rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, dead on arrival. Hard to go back to the game after that news flash.
John and Yoko had just released Double Fantasy, his comeback album. And unfortunately, sales of the album were sluggish, and reviews of the album, Double Fantasy, were lukewarm at best. Music critics for Rolling Stone, New York Times, and The Village Voice were prepared to print poor reviews of the album. But after his assassination, those publications withdrew the reviews, and David Geffen, president of Geffen Records, didn't want to appear to exploit John Lennon's death, so he stopped advertising the record. But the album jumped to #1 on the charts and remained there for 2 months. Record stores had to ration copies of the album, and so Dave Geffen hurriedly increased production. Frederick Semin, I think that's how you say his name, John Lennon's personal assistant, described his surprise that the shock of John Lennon's death was quickly replaced by business profit. He said Geffen and the lawyers busied themselves talking about record sales. There was something eerily festive about their demeanor. He also wrote he found Geffen sitting at my desk, talking on the phone to the West Coast saying, "Business is booming." Dave Geffen, encouraged by Yoko, had hit the jackpot, and he made no effort in hiding his satisfaction. Lennon's passing triggered a run on his product. Lennon records were top priority in every pressing plant. Lennon's death became a gold mine and the first hit for Geffen's new label. The album, that originally was going to have poor reviews, even won a Grammy. This is when the labels realized that when artists, no matter how past their peak, die, the money spigot will open up. Steve O. Evans wrote, "Well, at the end of my time working in the music industry back in November 1991, Freddie Mercury was taken away from us. It was very close to Christmas retail period. The difference was those close to him knew it was a matter of time, and even EMI, the record label, had geared up to another possible retail bonanza, which it most certainly was." And the labels will go so far as to take advantage of an artist's death by even raising the wholesale prices of their music, like they did when Whitney Houston died. The UK news outlet The Guardian was quick to notice the increase, which some insist came within half an hour of Whitney Houston's death. The change happened when Sony Music, which owns the rights to much of Houston's back catalog, increased the wholesale price of the Ultimate Collection, her best of record. And even after the initial boost of sales right after an artist dies, what doesn't get reported weeks or months later is that the deceased artist's consumption remains elevated for weeks, months, or years. Sinead O'Connor's weekly U.S. consumption remains 32% above the level it was at before she died in 2023. Tina Turner's catalog consumption remains 25% greater than the week before she died in 2023. Nearly a decade after their deaths, both Prince and David Bowie are enjoying music consumption well above their pre-death levels. And so, Ozzy joins the ranks of the evergreens, watching from beyond, as Osbourne's rare position as a pop culture icon and musical legend means his death could lead to a long-lasting surge in streams and sales. You can see now why the labels and investment companies are paying millions of dollars for the music catalogs of the graying rock stars. They may be mortal, but their music is immortal and will always bring in the dough. Thanks for watching. If you like this episode, please subscribe and share and all those kinds of things. Bye.
Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on